Here's a first on Locked On Cardinals. Is it time to panic about Kyler Murray?
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cardinals Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. I am torn. This is going to be a tough one to kind of walk through. I'm happy you're here with me. I was a little under it yesterday. Apologize for not having a podcast up immediately following the embarrassment that was the Week 12 matchup for the Cardinals. 37-14, Rams took it to them after a solid opening drive that resulted in a touchdown. The Cardinals offense went missing, ended up scoring a late touchdown in the fourth quarter when the game was completely out of reach. Discuss it. We'll talk Tankathon Tuesday as there was some massive movement. We'll do that in the next segment or in the final segment, and some positives in the loss to the Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Again, this episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Not clickbait. Is it time to panic with Kyler Murray? It's something that I've never really looked at that as a possibility. And it's not because I haven't thought it. Like, oh, you know what? Is this something that could be a massive permanent red flag that the Cardinals will need to either figure out how to work with or move on from? So to answer the question, is it time to panic with Kyler Murray? Not yet. But this is the closest I've been to really taking a look and saying, you know what? Maybe I and many others have been wrong. And I don't, but I'm not there yet. You'll see over the next few days, and after the game on Sunday, I'll do a deeper dive into this in the Cardinals bye week podcast. I'll do, pre-bye week awards, things like that, things that I normally do during their bye week, especially with it being so late. You can look a lot more into next season during those shows, as opposed to what the Cardinals need to do in an effort to stay competitive this season, because we know that by all accounts that ship has sailed. But I did want to talk about this with Kyler. So the thing that I saw as were the things that were so similar to the last couple seasons. And what we saw with Drew Petzing's offense is that if run properly, it works. The one thing that I don't really understand was Kyler Murray threw the ball 45 times on Sunday. James Conner had some good runs early on. Kyler Murray had, the touchdown run, and they vacated the run game. I don't really understand that. But what we saw from Kyler Murray was a lot of short passes, a lot of missed deep balls. And to me, and I don't know if this is one game, I don't know what this is. Kyler Murray has been known for his arm strength. I don't care how big he is. Has been known for his arm strength. And what we've seen since he's come back is a lot of underthrown balls. There was 2 weeks ago where Hollywood Brown had a step at least underthrew him. Trey McBride, the 32 or 33-yard pass that led to the game-winning kick by Matt Prater against Atlanta was underthrown. It ended up working to their advantage because the cornerback was turned around. So that may be, that may have been by design. But there was one cheat code that the Cardinals had when the offense wasn't working, and it was a deep ball from Kyler Murray to Christian Kirk, to Hollywood Brown, to Rondale Moore, whatever it was. We saw the touchdown throw against Houston to Rondale Moore, but these are touch throws. His zip seems to be a little bit off. And the reason why it's not time to panic yet, and I think that it's, I try to be as rational as possible on this show. I think it's a little bit irrational with him less than a year back from an ACL tear to really gauge him fully as it pertains to the future with him in the organization. So I'm not on that aisle shift yet where it's like, nope, got to get rid of him. That's not even close. But I think it's important to discuss the things that we have seen and what we did see against the Rams, where it looked eerily similar to what we've experienced over the last couple years. And it's a new offense. The defense is terrible. And Kyler Murray's coming back from an ACL tear. These aren't excuses. These are reasons. This isn't me standing on, the last grain of sand on my soapbox of, Kyler Murray's not the problem. It's always that's not this. This is a very fluid situation. But what we do know through 3 weeks back is he's regressed every week. And what we do know through 3 weeks back is so is the defense. And what we do know through 3 weeks back is so is the offensive line. And what we do know through the last 3 weeks is the Cardinals aren't a good football team, and Kyler Murray's not bailing them out. So is that because of rust? Some of it. And if it's some of it, you can't go on this tirade of, Kyler Murray's the problem, got to get rid of him. It's too small of a sample size. And this was the conundrum going into this season. Much like my biggest fear realized last year, aside from, injuries and stuff, was Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins not playing meaningful snaps together. Everydayers, that I screamed that from the mountaintops. With DeAndre Hopkins being out for the first 6 weeks due to his PED suspension, Hollywood Brown coming into the new offense, not seeing the proof of concept with the two of them on the field at one time, playing meaningful snaps together, could be two cars passing in the night and not ever being able to stop in the same parking lot. I mean, that's a stupid analogy, but you know what I mean. And Hollywood Brown gets hurt the week DeAndre Hopkins is set to come back the next week, and this is where we are. The same with Kyler Murray. For draft capital and draft, ranking, it was the perfect time for Kyler Murray to get injured. Obviously you never want anybody to get injured. But then on the real gauging of if Kyler Murray's the future quarterback for this team, it was by far the worst time that Kyler Murray could have gotten injured. Because not only did he miss the first chunk of this season, the team's so bad, especially defensively, that how are you really going to gauge? What are the metrics going to be to determine on if he's the guy or not? Because if it's just performance in a vacuum by him, they're going to move on through the first 3 weeks. But because there's 5 weeks left, they play some very tough teams. They play Philly, they play San Francisco, they play Seattle, and they play Pittsburgh on Sunday. I'm doing my crossover Thursday with Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers on Thursday. It's going to be fascinating. That's a tough defense. And the Cardinals' interior offensive line, left side of the offensive line, is bad. What are the metrics? So when I ask, is it time to panic with Kyler Murray? You can't say yes yet. But we're the closest ever on this podcast and in my brain to saying yes than we've ever been. But we're still far away from that. I think this is going to be on Sunday. It's going to be a great litmus test with Pittsburgh, great defense, TJ Watt, etc. Great secondary. A team that's making a playoff push with a quarterback who hasn't played well for the majority of the year. He was one of the highest rated Pro Football Focus graded quarterbacks last week in their victory. But this is going to be another litmus test. You go, it's not time to panic yet, but you're going to hear me, I believe tomorrow. My topics will be, what will Kyler Murray need to do to prove that he deserves to be the quarterback for the future? And what will we need to witness to debunk that? And that's going to be one of the toughest segments I've ever had to do, because I have to do introspection in that as well, because I've been so far on the side of Kyler Murray up until this point. I don't think it's time to panic yet, but I thought that after what happened yesterday, it was necessary of a segment. What were some positives from yesterday's 37-14 loss to the Rams? I mean, there are a couple, and a couple of them are abstract, but it's a segment worthy, so we'll do it as we roll on here. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by the Game Time app. Now, if you're looking for tickets, the Game Time app is where you got to go. Super easy to use. Okay. You can get tickets for, comedy, basketball games, football games, theater, whatever it is. You can buy tickets last minute up until the beginning of the event and even sometimes a full hour after. The coolest part about this for me that I talk about with the Game Time app is you can see the view from your seats before you buy them. So you click the row, say you want to go to a Suns game or a Cardinals game. You click it, and then you can get a panoramic view of your entire viewpoint if you were to buy those seats. It's an absolute cheat code. So you're not like spending money on seats that, don't have the view that you want. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I'll be doing crossover Thursday with Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers. On Thursday, it should be fascinating as we kind of pull out the microscope as the 2023 season comes to a close or, pivots towards that to kind of see who's going to be with this team and this organization moving forward. Is it time to panic about Kyler Murray? No. Resounding still. No. Okay. And the reason why is there are built-in things this season that protect that. Less than a year off an ACL tear, new offense, bad defense, offensive line isn't great. And I know that quarterbacks overcome bad offensive line play all the time. Ask Joe Burrow. I know that. Okay. Russell Wilson in Seattle. It's not an excuse. This is a work in progress roster. They weren't going to be able to overhaul it for an entire season. It was very unfortunate that Kyler Murray tore his ACL midway through last season because it cut short pretty much in half the actual tape that Monty Osborne, Jonathan Gannon, and Michael Bitter were going to be able to look at to see if he's truly the guy for the future. Okay, and the defense gives this offense zero help. Couple good stops in the second half. Last week, they still gave up a 37-burger. So it's not time to hit the panic button yet, but this is the closest it's been. This is the first time I've ever talked about this since he was drafted in 2019. First time. So we'll see. Positives from the loss of the Rams on Sunday. I mean, James Conner is good at football. Okay. James Conner, even though he only had 6 carries, which is wild, when he gets run, he's been still the most effective offensive player the Cardinals have had. 6 carries for 27 yards, which is kind of, head scratching with how well he's played up until this point. But game flow, I don't know, maybe they want to put him on ice until next season. James Conner, and I've said this on Twitter multiple times, he needs to be an Arizona Cardinal for the future. Next couple years. I think he's got money under contract next year. I think he should get an extension, a small one. I'm not saying giving him $30 million guaranteed. That was never the point of the conversation. James Conner has been the most important offensive player the Arizona Cardinals have had, not named Kyler Murray, since he came over a couple years ago. He has been. So if you bring him back, you want him to be a Cardinal. You want him to be a vocal leader, which he has been this year before Kyler Murray came back. And he's been a great locker room guy. He's ingratiated himself like he's an Arizona Cardinal. Extend him. And again, doesn't have to be a whole lot of money, okay? It seems like he likes being here. And if you can bring in a young running back to complement him in the backfield, this could be a viable backfield for years to come. So that's a positive, even though it was small sample size. Number 2, they lost. Like at this time of the year, I've said, up until this point, up until last week and the week before, go win games. You want to see exactly what you've got. That is starting to shift. And this is, you don't ever want teams to lose. If the Cardinals win 2 out of their last 5 games, like, okay, whatever, they'll pick 4th instead of 2nd. While it seems to be a massive gap, I don't see that happening, because another positive was the Bears won. So I'm going to talk about Tankathon Tuesday next, but it's like these things, when I said they were abstract, there were very few positives to take away from Sunday's game against the Rams. Numbers-wise, penalties were down, which is good. They didn't throw up 100 burger worth of penalties. It was still too much. What were they? 5? It was 5 for 34, and the majority of them were on one drive. I remember it was 2nd and 34 at one point. So it's embarrassing. Still Kyler Murray coming back, new offense, things out of whack, whatever it is. And then, another thing that's positive, that's weird because it's could potentially be a negative, but you're pulling off the the Band-Aid, is this wide receiver group maybe isn't as deep as I thought it was, which means you have to add talent. I don't know if it's Marvin Harrison. I don't know. We can talk about the draft a lot later. Hollywood Brown ended up having pretty good numbers, 6 for 88. He had a large chunk gain that accounted for the majority of that. I think he had a 36-yard catch and run. So much of this is predicated upon Hollywood Brown's production as it ties to Kyler Murray. I don't see a world where where one of them is back and the other isn't. It's going to be both or neither. And it's going to be a fascinating storyline to continue to discuss. But, I guess the biggest positive from Sunday was the scripted plays early in the games work. You saw it in Houston. It was a long touchdown catch by Rondale Moore. And then it was a very, very methodical, run-heavy, peppered in with some good play action by Kyler Murray drive for their first drive of the game, where they went for 2 and ended up getting it, going up 8-7 early in the game. And then the wheels fell off. And that's the disheartening part. With Cliff, the scripted plays very rarely worked early in games. And then it was kind of when Kyler Murray was able to just break whatever mold there was of a game plan, where he was able to succeed. The biggest issue I have, pivoting back to the first segment with Kyler Murray, is when rigidity is necessary, that's where he struggles. Yes, broken plays, he is one of the best in the game. He is at making things happen out of nothing. But that shouldn't be relied upon to win games. And we saw on Sunday, simple game plan that Joshua Dobbs was able to run fine. He was able to run it okay. Kyler Murray was struggling. Just something to think about. Tankathon Tuesday. If you haven't heard this segment yet, it's not exactly what you think. I'm going to give some information based upon where the Cardinals are and the teams surrounding them, and where the Texans are and where the teams are surrounding them regarding to win-loss record, and what it could mean for the inevitable actual draft order for the 2024 draft. I'll discuss it next as we roll on here. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by FanDuel. We're going into week 13, man. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Cardinals lose 37-14 to the Rams. If you want to catch more of my big dumb face, you can check me out on the Locked On NFL Thursday National Show with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans. We do it every week. Have a good time talking national stories. And that's a fun show. We talk national stuff. We talk, draft order, trades, things like that. Like as we go through, we talk about the hottest topics going into Thursday Night Football, namely being one of them until the season ends. So, go check that out. You can follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Please go to the YouTube channel, search Locked On Cardinals, and hit the subscribe button. I would do Locked On Arizona Cardinals because there is a Locked On St. Louis Cardinals as well. If you like baseball, you'll like that over there in St. Louis. So the Cardinals are slated, if the season were to end today, to pick second. The Texans, after their loss to Jacksonville, are slated to pick 17th. And let's start with Houston first. Okay, so as of now, there are 12 teams with 5 or 6 wins. Okay, so if Houston loses again next week, they're going to drop it. Like, it'll be a more exponential drop from 20 to 17 like they did this week after their loss to Houston, or after the loss to Jacksonville. And every week since Houston went on a couple game winning streak when they beat the Cardinals, it's like, just be happy if it's a top 20 pick. If they don't make the playoffs, that's a win. Because CJ Stroud is good. The defense is much improved. Tank Dell is good. Devin Singletary's having a breakout year. D'Amico Ryans is good. And that division, they have to play Tennessee, I believe, one more time. Indy's not very good, even though they have a handful of wins this year. Just be happy if it's a top 20 pick. And there are teams around the NFL, Philly, Baltimore, that get their first round talent in the teens, because they're very rarely picking in the top 10. I know Philly moved up and traded up and drafted Jalen Carter. I think they drafted him 9th this year, I believe. But, they get their picks in the teens, 20s, in the second, third round. Guys of impact. So just because it's not going to be a top 5 pick coupled with the Cardinals' top 5 pick doesn't mean they're not going to be able to get a massive piece in this rebuilding process. I mentioned it quickly in the last segment. The Bears beating Minnesota last night was massive, because that puts the Bears at 4 wins, tied with Washington and the Giants, as well as Tampa Bay, Jets, and Chargers, and Tennessee, 4 through 10. Carolina still 1 win, going to Chicago, first overall pick. Cardinals at 2 wins. New England's at 2 wins. Having that 2-game gap between the Cardinals and Chicago is massive, especially with only 5 games to play. They do play Chicago, I believe, the second to last game of the season. So I don't know if they're going to be sitting Kyler Murray that, but so many things are going to happen between now and then. And then Arizona Cardinals fans just need to be New England Patriots fans and Carolina Panthers fans for the rest of the season. Just be happy that you're not an actual fan of those teams this season, because it's been a tough go. The Cardinals have at least been competitive. New England having to swap quarterbacks back and forth seemingly every game. Bryce Young not having the weapons necessary to be able to succeed, even though that defense is pretty good. Frank Reich getting fired. It's been a tough year for the Cardinals, but you look around the NFL, especially with teams that are picking in the top 7. Giants have been a mess. Washington is probably better than their 4-8 record. Chicago's kind of a mess. New England's a mess. Tampa Bay is potentially, they're in a transition year. Baker's played fine, but they've lost, a bunch of games in a row. This is a tough position for the Cardinals to be in, to stomach for this year. But come the end of this season, it will be more and more clear as to which players are a part of the future for this team, which definitely are not. And I don't know if we're going to be having a conversation about Kyler Murray with that or not. I don't know. I do know that this is the first time I've discussed this on this podcast since he was drafted in 2019, bringing in a slimmer of doubt that he may not be the guy. It's difficult for me to say he's not when he's less than a year removed from an ACL tear, new offense, bad defense, bad offensive line. While quarterbacks have overcome bad defenses, bad offensive line since the history of football began, it's still in the reason why and not giving an excuse for as pertaining to Kyler Murray's performance. And also, on top of that, the toughest thing for me to shake, you look around the NFL in 2023, how many teams would rather have Kyler Murray than their starting quarterback? I'm not talking about a quarterback being injured, being out for the year, and they're on their second or third string guy. 10, 12 teams would rather have Kyler Murray than their current quarterback. And that makes it very difficult for me to look at the Cardinals and say, you know what, you've got to move off this guy when a third of the NFL would rather have him than their current quarterback. It's just very difficult. It's a mind screw. And at this point, I'm still saying that it's not time to panic, and Kyler Murray still should be the quarterback for the future. It's on the what's between cold and lukewarm. Whatever seat that is, that's kind of where we are, and there are plenty of games left to be able to determine the future. And I will keep this in mind. One other thing. This is super future pacing, but it's a nice little, ribbon to tie this to tie a bow on this podcast. Is just because they decide to move forward with Kyler Murray in 2024 doesn't mean that they have to move on with him after that. It could be one more year, and that's it. This isn't like you have to either have him for 10 years or not. It's not a massive mistake in perpetuity if they decide to stick with him with a better roster and see if it's real, and if it's not, you can move on with him. They don't have to just have him for 10 years. There is a middle ground there. But again, I think it's too early to panic. There's too many things going against Kyler needing to perform at an elite level, but it's going to be a week-to-week thing. I will talk to you tomorrow. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals.